I have some notes. But thank you, Sandy, and the Western Wave Republican Club for inviting me to speak. It's good to be among friends and fellow patriots. And thank you for people who have shown up to the Board of Education meetings to give support to me and Cheryl and to speak at the public comments. I was asked by Sandy to talk about what freedom means to me. See that? But first I want to give you a little bit of background. My journey to political activism started in 2019 at the start of Dan Forest's campaign to run for governor. So for many years my wife and I were just kind of the run-of-the-mill Republican, kind of like what Jason was talking about. And I went out to vote. I even went out to vote for the primary, but I didn't know who I was voting for. But I started listening to programs on the radio like Glenn Beck and Rush Limbaugh a few years before, and it really got my eyes open. And so when Trump ran for president, it was really just kind of a eye-opening experience for me. And even though we had relatively good times during President Trump's years, my wife and I decided that voting was not enough. So instead we started donating to our favorite candidates, and that's how we ended up in Winston-Salem at the kickoff rally for Dan Forest when he started his campaign. Fast forward to the next year, and as all of you know, COVID kind of changed everything. And I still remember in early 2020, some of my friends, Chinese friends, were telling me about how people in China were just dropping dead in the streets from mysterious illness. And when it started happening, surfacing in the West Coast, my thought as a physician was, I'll pretty much be in the front line of this pandemic. And I still had trust in the medical authorities, and I believed that medical knowledge would help to solve this problem. But when the entire world shut down, I thought this would help because I see a lot of cases at the hospital, and I saw people in the nursing home that were the whole nursing home went into full quarantine because of all the cases inside. And people got sick, some people died, and there was little that I could do. So when the COVID shot came out, I didn't hesitate to take it because I figured it would allow me to be in a better position to help my patients. And when they say only essential workers can work, I thought, well, it's a sacrifice for the greater good. A little inconvenience for everyone, for a few weeks was worth it. Well, but then the narrative changed. We were told initially to trust the experts, but slowly it turned into where you cannot question the experts. We were told to wear masks in the hospital and to stand 6 feet apart. And by looking back, it was kind of comical, in fact. When we tried to eat lunch together or when we were standing in the elevator, people were standing on each corner of the elevator.
Oh yeah, crazy.
And just holding their breath. And at lunch we were kind of joking that we were actually causing a super spreader event right there. Of course, visitors that come to the hospital had to get their temperature checked, and the hospital staff, on the other hand, we were given a little grace. We were on the honor system, so we would just have to log in every morning to say that we don't have any symptoms or exposure. But if we did, we had to go to the principal's office. I mean, the employee health. And there was a time when doctors started prescribing ivermectin because some doctors had observed that there was a low incidence of COVID in areas of the world where ivermectin was being used regularly.
Right.
Then, even then, the state of North Carolina even had a supply of ivermectin for us providers in the nursing home that we could actually obtain and dispense to the nursing home residents to provide some help. But then, all of that sudden, we were told, you cannot prescribe it. And and no question asked. When it came to the vaccine, it was at first a voluntary, but then it made it into a mandatory thing. And when certain people didn't take it, they risked losing their jobs. Doctors and nurses already had infection, would just quietly question why they had to take it, but they can't really say it out loud. That's just the tip of the iceberg for what I experienced as a physician. Now, outside of the hospital, you all felt it. You saw what happened. We were told to get the vaccine, your booster, your second booster, carry your vaccine passport. We all voluntarily complied to shut down, and then only essential workers were able to work. So the restaurants and small businesses shut down. Many people lost their jobs, and churches stopped having worship services, and some churches never came back. And then, of course, we know about schools. The schools closed, and children had to do virtual learning. When schools did reopen, children were told to wear masks, even though it was clear the regular mask didn't work, and the N95 masks were just literally suffocating. So when people tried to push back against these draconian measures and tried to reopen businesses, churches, and schools, we were met with all kinds of resistance. Some people even got arrested. Because of fear, many people were willingly giving up their freedoms. So there is a saying by Aristotle, nature abhors a vacuum. When something is removed, something else takes its place. Our freedom is like that. When we give up our autonomy, something or someone will come in and take control. When we decide to trust the expert to make a decision for us, someone will gladly come in and just do just that. When we choose to self-censor for fear of being canceled, we are essentially giving up our freedom of speech. If we are afraid to speak up for what is right, then the other side wins. When the church fails to stand for the truth and speak out against immorality, the immorality just continues to push society further and further away from the truth. When people do not speak up against lies, the lies become normalized. That's what happened in the Bolshevik Revolution, that's what happened in the Cultural Revolution, and that's what's happening with the LGBTQ revolution. Our freedom is not free, and soldiers have died to defend our freedom. So why do so many of people are so willing to give up their freedoms? We all have to take a part in measure to make sure that we preserve our freedoms. So it was in this context that I started going into politics, and eventually I found myself running for Wake County School Board, and of course education was a top priority for me and my family. And I saw how children's education was devastated by the pandemic. And the reading scores, math scores plummeted, and it was just starting to recover now. But more importantly, the pandemic really stunted the social and emotional growth of our children. And we are still dealing with the epidemic of behavior problems in the classroom, and our disciplinary policies is not effective in dealing with it. And teachers are leaving the profession, and we can't get enough bus drivers. Yeah. There's still a lot to do, and so I have decided I should run for re-election this year. And Cheryl and I are the only two conservatives on the board, and we use our position to speak up whenever we have a chance. And I make it a point to build mutual respect with the other board members so that when I do speak, they are more likely to listen to what I have to say.
Smart.
I hope to continue to be a voice of truth and a voice of reason. And as I ramp up my campaign, I will appreciate your support in all ways. And even more importantly, Cheryl and I can use more conservative voices on the board. This year there are 4 seats up, additional 4 seats up for election beside mine, including areas covering Apex, Holly Springs, and Central Raleigh. And we really need people to step up. It's just like the fight to preserve our freedoms. If we as conservatives don't stay engaged in the discourse on how public education should be, some other folks will easily step in and steer it in the direction that we don't want it to go. Our children's future is at stake, and we can't afford to lose this generation. Mm-hmm. So really, this is a book that I brought with me called Live Not Thy Lies by Roger, and it's actually a phrase that was used by Alexander Solzhenitsyn, who is outspoken against the communist Russia, Soviet Russia, and he paid for it by being in prison and persecuted, and so we may or may not face that same risk, but it is something that we have to consider as we fight for what is right. Thank you.